Hey guys, if you guys can hear me, I hope you can, if the sound and audio is working well. I'm Cameron Reel from the Georgia-Cumberland Conference.
And I'm Rachel Beaver, also from the Georgia-Cumberland Conference.
Today we're going to be talking a little bit about copyright do's and don'ts, specifically for your church. And so we're going to be showing a quick video and then just answering some of your questions.
Yes, there's going to be a short Q&A after. So if you have any questions over the material, I know that things like copyright can be a little daunting, a little new, not the most super exciting subject matter, but very important nonetheless. So if you have comments as you're watching the video, please leave them in the chat. We are reading those. And as you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. We're very happy that you're here with us today. You're taking the time out of your week to learn from us.
Yeah, and we just want to let you know, just a quick disclaimer, we're not lawyers. We're communication professionals, and we're going to answer these questions about copyright as it pertains to your church as best we can from our standpoint. But if you have any serious legal issues, we highly recommend reaching out to a lawyer who can answer that. We'll be able to provide you guys with some resources that your church can use for answering some of these legality questions or copyright issues or just anything like that. And so we'll throw some of those resources in near the end of the chat. Otherwise, without further ado, let's go ahead and start this video.
The information being presented relies on legal principles based on federal laws in the United States. The information being presented is not intended to be specific legal advice, even if you ask questions. Always consult legal counsel to ensure you are in compliance with the law.
Say you're writing an article about an event that happened in your church to submit to the Communique or the Southern Tidings. This event was so great it was covered in your local newspaper. You think, this article is already worded so well. I'll just copy some of their paragraphs to use in my article. Doing this would be plagiarism. Plagiarism is the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. This can be written material, photography, graphic design, music, lyrics, even choreography. Creative works such as these are someone else's intellectual property. Intellectual property is defined as a work or invention that is the result of creativity, such as a manuscript or design to which one has the rights to and for which might apply for a patent, copyright, trademark, etc. Using intellectual property that you don't have permission to use is illegal and could put your church at risk of a lawsuit or a fine. So let's dive into some of the do's and don'ts when creating content for your church. Imagery, such as photography, design, layout, and logos, are also considered intellectual property. Did you know that the term Seventh-day Adventist Church is a trademarked phrase, as well as the flame logo that accompanies it? This means that legally, not just anyone can start a church and call it a Seventh-day Adventist Church. They have to be within our system to use our branding. The General Conference has established branding guidelines that lay out exactly how the Adventist branding can be used, including fonts, colors, sizing, backgrounds, and more. As a communication leader, take some time to familiarize yourself with the North American Division's branding guidelines. Some branding guidelines might seem like a hassle to implement, or maybe you just don't like them, but proper use of them ultimately protects you and your church. What about photography? Photos are also considered intellectual property. If you're a graphic designer for your church, you want to use photos in your material that you have license to use. This means you can't download a photo from Google Images and use it on your event flyer. You also can't use your photos on someone else's event flyer that you copied. Graphic design and layout are also considered intellectual property. There are many resources where you can find free graphic design templates that include a usable photo library, such as Canva. For more information on photography and graphic design resources, check out our previous training, Design for Impact, or reach out to our office if you have additional questions.
What about if we're taking our own photos in church? To my understanding, if a church employee is using church-owned equipment, all images or video produced are property of the church. On the flip side, if a church volunteer is using a personal camera to document a church event, the volunteer is the intellectual property owner of that content, unless otherwise stated through written agreement between the volunteer and the church. Lastly, if a church volunteer is using a church camera, the volunteer is still the owner of the intellectual property unless a written agreement is in place that grants the church all ownership over any intellectual property. I encourage your church to create specific guidelines for all volunteers stating who owns the intellectual property being created. This will not only help your church, but will also help protect the individual creators. Let's talk about streaming in CCLI. We live in a digital age, especially post-COVID, where we want to be able to reach as many people as possible in as many ways as possible. To do this, many churches have begun live streaming their services online. Platforms like YouTube and Facebook have made that incredibly easy for most churches to do. But just because it's easy doesn't necessarily mean that it's legal. Let me ask you these questions. Is your church streaming their service online? Is your church copying or distributing song lyrics or sheet music from anywhere, including the Seventh-day Adventist hymnal? Are you projecting music lyrics on your screen or broadcasting pre-recorded music in a live stream? If you answered yes to at least one of these questions, then your church needs a copyright streaming license. A copyright license protects not only your church, but also the copyright owner of whatever intellectual property you're using. There are a few different options for copyright license, depending on the extent of your needs and services. The most common copyright license available to churches today is the Christian Copyright Licensing International License, or CCLI. Depending on what options you select with your CCLI license, your church can live stream worship songs performed in your church service by your band or other live performers, store lyrics, print and duplicate songs, record services, make custom song arrangements, project and display lyrics, and even translate songs. CCLI offers a streaming license also, which allows churches the ability to post live recorded worship services online through their own website or on social media sites. Both of these services cover nearly 450,000 of the songs authorized by the CCLI license. The CCLI license covers essentially all the reproduction rights a church would need, but it doesn't cover performance rights. Performance rights need to be considered when any music is performed outside of religious services. CCLI assists with any songs intended to assist the church in congregational singing, while CCS covers any public performance outside of worship services. CCS, or Christian Copyright Solutions, authorizes churches and ministries to legally perform live or pre-recorded versions of over 28 million songs anywhere outside of religious services. This includes music before and after services, retreats, conferences, special events, ceremonies, and vacation Bible schools. But just having the license isn't enough. You'll need to work with your team to verify that your church is following all the guidelines in order to accurately show the proper licensing information. Many times, that means you'll need to be showing the correct credit information in-house and on stream. Copyright laws protect creators. Would you go into a restaurant and expect to receive food and service for free? Just as cooks and servers are paid for their work, writers, photographers, designers, singers, and songwriters deserve compensation for their creations. And we as a church strive to treat others the way we want to be treated. To learn more about copyright laws and intellectual property within your church, visit AdventistRisk.org.
All right. Well, it's us again. You just saw us on the video, and here we are again. If you're just joining us, I'm Cameron Reel, and this is Rachel Beaver. We're from the Georgia-Cumberland Conference. What you're watching right now is a joint collaboration training between the Georgia-Cumberland and the Kentucky-Tennessee communication departments, and we're here to inform you about copyright. a little bit. So throw your questions in the comments, and we'll try to answer as many as we can tonight in this short time that we have pertaining to your church.
All right. So we want to get into the questions?
Let's start with some of the questions that we have. Looks like we already have a few ready.
Yeah.
So this first question, Rachel, go ahead and read that for us.
How does copyright apply to written works such as sermons, articles, and blog posts? That is great. It kind of it depends on what the copyrighted material is. If you're talking about wording, text, obviously the best way for like blog posts to be everything that you take from another source, you put in quotes, and then in parentheses next to it's called a parenthetical citation. You say like where that came from, usually like the author's name or the publication it came from. There's different ways to cite sources. So just make sure that you're making it very obvious that that it's in quotes and it's not something that you wrote, because passing it off as like you wrote it, that's where the problem really comes in.
So really the most important thing that you would say is to just cite your sources.
Always cite your sources. And I know it kind of takes you back to middle school English class where you're like, I'm writing this as I gotta cite my sources at the end, but it matters.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I believe even citing Bible verses, the specific versions, is that correct?
Yes. So, you have the book and the verse, and you want to include the translation as well. And there are some translations even that you have to have a little more extensive cited information. I think like might be the Message Bible, if I'm thinking of correctly.
Okay.
They have specific rules as to how they want it cited. Just make sure you do your research. But yes, always cite your sources.
All right. Awesome. Let's go into the next question here. This one says, how can I get a CCLI and CCS license? And so we talked about this a little bit, kind of the differences that those two licenses cover. A CCLI license usually covers anything duplicating. So putting lyrics up on a screen or printing lyrics or using song lyrics or any stuff like that. Whereas CCS, it covers performance. So being able to play pre-recorded songs. You can, I believe the website is called, let me look here. It's ccli.com, maybe. Let me look. Yes, us.ccli.com. You can get a license. It will tell you everything you need to know. It will tell you everything you need to know as far as like what your church would need. Like you'll need, if you guys are streaming, you'll need an additional license on top of that CCL license, which is a CCL streaming license. It's not much more for that. The CCL is a lot cheaper than the CCS because the CCS covers, I think I said somewhere in the millions of songs in its catalog that it gives you permission to use. Essentially what the CCS license is it lets you, play songs anywhere outside of worship services. Usually you're protected in worship services by most stuff, and that CCLI license covers most of that. So you can find how to sign up for both of those on that website, us.ccli.com. And obviously, if you're not in the US, then whatever, but you can just Google CCLI or CCS license, and you can look into those. And I believe, I'm not 100% on this, I believe that there's different tiers that you can get that cover different variations of things. And so there's a little bit of that, but that's basically what you need.
And you have that that CCLI number like on the screen.
Right.
That's what I usually see.
Right. There's when you get a CCLI license, and I'm not 100% sure on this, you'll need to look at the website specifically to look at that. But I believe that you'll need to put your CCLI number when crediting the song or the lyric or whatever. And then you also include the CCLI number of the song that you're doing. So you're always putting your number up and, when you last had it updated or last, basically just when you kept it renewed, essentially.
Interesting.
All right. So next up, here's our next question. How does copyright apply to a PowerPoint presentation?
I mean, you can put anything in a PowerPoint. You can put your mind to it. I mean, very, very similar to what we said earlier about written works, especially in a PowerPoint presentation. I see a lot of times there's like a slide at the very end with a list of all of the works that you cited.
Yeah,
Remember,
yeah.
I made you do that for your
You
presentation.
did. I had to do that for a presentation.
I was like, make sure you cite your sources. So I bug even him about it. So that's the easiest way to do it. Same for photos. Make sure that the photos that you're using in your presentation, you have the rights to use. Don't pull images off of Google.
Right.
Make sure you're finding them from either Unsplash or Pexels. Those are two really great websites where you can find images to use, for your presentations for free. But make sure that wherever you're getting them from, you read the licensing information, because you can type in royalty-free images and a lot of things are going to come up. But some are like, oh yeah, you can use this as long as it's not a commercial. You can use this, as long as it's for basically like a nonprofit sort of thing. You're not getting any money from putting this on. Like someone can't put this in like an advertisement that they're going to make money off of. A lot of licenses are like that. That'd be for commercial use. So wherever you're getting it from, even if it says royalty free, that still doesn't mean free download. Read the licensing info on those photos as well. But both that and citing your sources for a PowerPoint presentation, those are two very good practices to have.
And PowerPoint is it's a resource. It's a presentation resource. So just putting anything into a PowerPoint doesn't make it yours, because you're making this. So you're building this PowerPoint out. And so really what you're doing, you're using PowerPoint as a presentation tool. So make sure that the things you're putting into that tool are being cited.
Same for like YouTube videos. If you put a YouTube video on your PowerPoint presentation, because it's informative or something,
right,
include there at the bottom, who published it, where you can find the link to it, the original creator, that sort of thing, and try not to use the whole video either. I know we'll probably
be careful polling YouTube videos or anything like that. I know that a lot of churches are streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Those platforms have specific rules about content being put up, because as a user of that content, let's say you're streaming to Facebook, everything you're putting on Facebook, they are thinking that you are generating all of that content. You're not regurgitating new content. They're saying, all this content is content that you own, and that's not true. So you need to look at the specific what is it called? It's the rules, not the rules.
Terms and conditions.
Look at the specific terms and conditions for Facebook. Look at the specific terms and conditions for YouTube or Vimeo or wherever you're streaming. Make sure you're looking at those.
For sure.
All right.
Sometimes Facebook/YouTube mutes live streams in the middle of the program due to copyright issues. If we have the license, how can we dispute and prevent that from happening?
So actually, this happened to me today. I actually uploaded a video to YouTube that had multiple songs on it, and I had bought all of these songs. And what happened was I got 2 copyright notices. They weren't warnings. They were just saying, hey, here's to copyright songs in your YouTube video. And I had the license number from those songs that I had bought, and I pulled those and I sent a message. I disputed the claim and I said, hey, dispute this. I own this, or I own the license to use this song. And within 30 minutes, they dropped the claim. So one thing to say with that is, a lot of these are automated. A lot of these things on YouTube and Facebook are automated, and they're just watching for content, especially music and especially videos out there. And so they're just looking. And so I recommend always disputing if you have a license or you're using it. Now, this question is specifically talking about muting in the middle of a live stream. That can happen if you don't have the proper CCLI, or you're not displaying the proper CCLI, or you're playing a video or you're playing a song that you don't have the license to use, and YouTube is saying, hey, we also don't have the license to use that, so we're going to have to mute this. Because essentially, when you look at it, there are owners of these songs, the singers, the songwriters, the whoever, they have an agreement with YouTube or Facebook to be able to play certain music. And so you just playing it on your church is going around without the proper license.
Yeah. And so like you said about that automated system, sometimes like YouTube and Facebook, there's not one person watching every single video that gets posted to check to make sure you have the rights. They're just running it through. They hear music. They say, oh, this music belongs to somebody. Yep. We better tell you not to do that. And then where did you find that dispute feature in YouTube?
So on YouTube, when you go to your excuse me, I'm sorry. When you go to your creator tab where it shows all the videos, it says there'll be a little copyright, and you hover over the copyright claim and you click details, and there'll be a thing and it will say you can either cut the song out of your video, you can dispute the song, or you can mute the song. And a lot of people that I know will mute it, or they'll cut it out. But what I do is I hit dispute, and then there's a couple more things that it takes you to do. It says, it'll take you through some steps saying, hey, we want to make sure that you click these boxes, agreeing to these terms and conditions. And then the very last thing, it'll be a little text box, and it will say, type why you should dispute it. That's where I usually put the license number. I'll put the license number. It makes you sign your name and hit I agree to this. And then it sends it off. You'll get an email notification saying, hey, your copyright claim is being disputed. And then if it gets resolved or whatever happens, you'll get an email saying, hey, your copyright has been dropped, or this has been whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's usually what happens. Facebook is a little different. I'm not entirely sure what the steps are for Facebook. I know that Facebook's customer service is not the best. And so it can be very difficult. It can be going through a lot of red tape to try to figure that out. I've heard of a lot of people having that issue where they do everything right. They have their CCLI number displayed, and it still gets flagged. And sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it on Facebook, unfortunately, because trying to get a hold of a person at Facebook is like looking for a needle in a haystack. You do have to remember, you are using their sites. Even though these sites are free to use, but you're using these sites, and so they're the owners. They have the rules. They're allowed to make the rules and enforce the rules. And so this is kind of some of the downsides of using these free resources to be able to live stream. If you look at it in the grand scheme of things, being able to stream and lots of people view it, versus it getting taken down or muted a couple times, it can kind of balance out. But cite your sources, obviously, and just make sure that you're at least doing everything you can. That way, when you do dispute a claim, then you can say, hey, look, I disputed this. Look, we had the owner to this song, or we have the rights to this song.
And maybe when in doubt, just take it down, because I know a lot, if your account is tied to like multiple like copy strike issues, eventually your account could get potentially just banned permanently, and that's what you don't want. So if you've disputed it, it still isn't working, you're not getting a hold of anyone that can help you, just cut the music out, edit it out, whatever you have to do, or take the video down completely, because in this case it's better to be safe than sorry. You don't want to lose access to your accounts. I hope that answered your question as far as that. I know that Facebook and YouTube is a very touchy, it's very convoluted, and those two are two specific things, and they have two specific terms and conditions as well. All right, our next question says, why does our video still get muted even when the pianist is playing live? Kind of similar to what we were just talking about.
So the songs that the pianist is playing, there's a good chance that the songs are not arrangements that the pianist made. But if they are, in that case, like we just talked about, there's an automated algorithm, and that algorithm is just picking up these notes and it's saying, oh, this sounds very similar to this song, or this sounds very similar to this song. And so, like we said, when that happens, it's an automated system, and it's either thinking either it is or it isn't. And so dispute that. If you're like, hey, we know for a fact that this pianist wrote this, or this did this, dispute it. If that really happens, in the moment, there's not a whole lot you can do. It's muted.
You just have to try to dispute it the same way you would any other music. And a lot of things, like in case you didn't know, you can play a song that's public domain at your church.
Right.
But while a song could be in the public domain, arrangements aren't.
Right.
Arrangements of certain songs, even if it's a song in public domain, is still subject to copyright. So like I said, when it's kind of going through the automated system and it sounds really close to somebody else's arrangement, it's flagging it as stolen material. So you just, like I said, treat it the same way you would, dispute it, do your best, and when in doubt, take it down. Right.
And I do want to emphasize again, we are communication professionals. We are not legal professionals, but we're going to try our best to help you, to help answer some of your questions. We've dealt with some copyright stuff as well, and having to dispute it with Facebook, and sometimes it's like pulling out fingernails,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to reach somebody at Facebook or at YouTube about why did this keep meeting? Sometimes you don't know. Like I said, that's the downside of using.
We had this very issue at our camp meeting last year.
Yep.
All right. How does copyright impact the spread of the gospel? Interesting.
How does it impact it? I would say it. If you look at it like this, if you're looking at it in an impact way, if you're asking this question, you may be asking, "Oh my goodness, they're stopping us from reaching people with the gospel. They're stopping us with this." I don't see it in that way. I see it more as a protection. It's copyright is protecting the owner and also protecting you. I mean, you have to think about it like the Bible. If I went around and was telling people that I wrote the Bible, which I didn't, but if I was going around telling people that's false, that's misleading. So what copyright is trying to do, and copyright protection and licenses like CCLI is, it's trying to help the church set up a thing so that it will say, hey, we're recognizing that this person owns the song. This person wrote the song. We are using the song, and here's the rights we have to use the song.
Mm-hmm. And I would almost say that following these guidelines and, obeying these laws, I would almost say contributes to the gospel, because it is in compliance with what God wants us to do, both in terms of being good stewards of what we have been given, which is the technology to, spread the word. It's in accordance with the commandments, thou shalt not steal.
Right.
So I think that making sure that we're doing your best to respect the people that created the songs, that took the pictures, I think that is what Christ would want us to do. Yeah,
I agree. So there's different ways to look at it.
I know it can be a little frustrating at times, but ultimately, like we said in the video, it protects you, it protects your church, and it protects creators.
Especially now, like I said in the video, it's hard because we're live streaming now. We've moved outside of our small church building and now are reaching not only the country but the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so copyright is protecting your small church building, from getting hit with a fine or a legal thing because it's being shown in Russia or India or wherever. Because you're broadcasting now, you're broadcasting your service, and we're trying to help you manage that.
And ultimately, when you do that right, you are doing that more effectively.
That's true. All right, we have some more questions here. All right, here's one. When I have a guest speaker that uses audio or visuals, who is responsible for what they use during a streamed service? Okay. So
good question.
That is a good question. That's kind of a loaded question because it feels very personal. It feels very,
because let me tell you, while you and I are not lawyers, Cameron, neither are pastors.
They are. That's true.
And I've seen some pictures in presentations that I've sat there and been like, I know they got that off Google. I know they did. And so if for some reason, I would say if there is some kind of system in place to ask your speakers ahead of time, hey, this is being streamed, make sure your presentation does not have copyrighted material in it, hopefully they will listen. And if they don't,
that's what Rachel said is right. I mean, the most important thing is to have a standard set up ahead of time. Set these rules for your church. That way, when a guest speaker comes in, it's hard to say no. It really is. It's really difficult to be like, oh man, you can't show that visual or you can't show that thing. I had to deal with this a couple weeks ago at a church where the guest speaker said, I want to show, he sent me a video and he said, I want to show this Facebook video. And I was like, I can try to find who owns the copyright to this, but I was like, no promises. And what I told him was, I said, here's the thing. It was this short 30 second. It was a short 30-second clip. And it was a joke that this comedian was telling. And I said, here's what you can do. You can tell that joke and say who told it from the platform. You're not showing the video. You're not doing that. You can say, hey, I heard this joke from Joe Smith and he told it like this, and you can tell it. Or you can not show it. And the pastor was like, well, why? And I said, oh, well, we could get a copyright strike. Our church YouTube could get flagged for literally showing content that you can find on their channel already. That's obviously owned by another, platform. And the pastor was like, okay, that makes sense. And I had to tell him, we could get fined. We could lose our account. Is this one sermon illustration worth losing your whole channel? So that's something you have to set up with your guest speakers, essentially. I think we're getting a message. I have to check that really quick. I'm sorry. Oh, in the private chat.
Yeah.
We're going to get this.
We have a secret chat that you guys don't know about.
Oh, that's a good thing. Our producer, you could say, or our director basically said, the best thing we can do is create a waiver that the guest speaker gives permission to use their likeness or stream them. And then they will have all the necessary rights to the content they are presenting. So creating that waiver allows you to basically say, this is, they've signed off that everything that they're doing, they're accountable for. It's no longer on your church. So that's good advice. I didn't even think of that.
That is good. Thank you, Nathan.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan Zinner. You can't see him, but he's behind the scenes thinking harder than we are with these mics in front of our mouths. But do we have any waivers like that we would be able to, if you're curious about what a waiver like that would look like, feel free to email one of us or Nathan. And you can find our email, or Paola or Xander. And we have a waiver that we can show you, for example, that we use for our guest speakers. We use some at camp meeting, and we use them anytime that we're going to record. If you're curious about that, here's my email right here. There we go. Right there. There's my email. And if you want to email Rachel, you can do that as well. Or Paola from the Kentucky, Tennessee. Perfect. If you have any questions about that, we can provide you an example one that you can create your own from that. It's essentially just a legal document that's going to allow them to be accountable for whatever they bring into your church.
Oh, that's good. What's our next question?
Here we go.
What is the difference between copyright strike and copyright notice?
So I'm assuming you're talking about YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah.
YouTube, because Facebook, I think, has a different set of rules.
To my understanding, a copyright notice is just like a gentle warning, like, hey, you've got music that has copyright in there. Would you want to dispute it? And that's not anything serious. A copyright strike is a strike against your entire channel. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You can get if you get too many copyright strikes, you could, your account could get taken down completely. So a notice is like hey, address this now. A strike is like, probably go ahead and take down the video. I don't know if you can still dispute it if it's a strike.
Yeah.
But it is a strike against your channel as a whole, and you want to make sure you're not getting too many of those.
If I just looked it up, if you get 3 strikes, then you get then your account gets disabled. It gets taken down. But with a notice, YouTube will monetize.
That's true.
So if you have a notice, YouTube will be able to make money off of your video, and you won't be able to make money off of your video, which I know that most of us are probably working in a nonprofit scenario. You're not intending to upload to make money. But you have to understand that YouTube's whole base is around making money from their videos.
Is advertising.
That's why they have ads. They want you to use their resources because they want you to watch their ads. And so YouTube will monetize your notices, and then past a notice, I believe a notice isn't bad until it becomes a strike. And a notice usually won't become a strike. A notice and strike are 2 different things that will happen on a video. And a strike, if you get 3 of those, then you get close to being,
or rather the monetization. In a lot of cases, if it's if you're using music that is owned by Universal Studios, whatever it's called, Universal Music
Group.
Yeah. Then that says that the monetization, like, you can keep this up, you can still use the music, but we're going to monetize it, and now they're making money off of your video.
Right. And they'll put ads on your video.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, what do we got next for questions? Keep those questions coming, guys. These are great questions. All right. Are the doctrines of the United, I was thinking about Universal Music Group. Are the doctrines of the Adventist Church copyrighted? Rachel?
I actually don't know if the doctrines themselves. I know that the term Seventh-day Adventist Church, as well as exactly how it's spelled, is a copyrighted, is a trademarked term.
Right.
But the doctrines themselves, I actually don't know, and I'm going to Google that later.
I'm gonna look into that really quick. Adventist Church.
I know
doctrine.
that if you're copying them word for word off of a Bible study, that could potentially be copywritten information, because the way that it's worded exactly on a Bible study that you copied it off of, that can get into some tricky territory. But as for the idea, I won't say, I don't think you can copyright ideas.
So it's interesting. I just looked this up, and it says on the website that everything under the website is copyrighted. But I couldn't see anywhere where it specifically said that our doctrines are copyrighted. So that would be a good thing. But the book, because there's a book that has the 28 fundamental beliefs, that is copyrighted, because that
is physically printed,
right,
worded this way.
Right.
So if you're taking it out of that, that is the copyrighted
so
material.
if you take a quote out of that book, then you'll need to cite where you got that from, properly, what page and who wrote it and whatnot. But the idea of the doctrines, it is an idea. It is not copyrighted. And I believe, I don't know if it falls under all the rules for copyright.
Like me telling you, hey, we go to church on Saturday, I'm not going to get a copyright strike for that, for telling you that. That's an idea. But if I told you, if I read this and said, this very specific wording to you, and I told you I came up with that, that would be a no-no.
Yeah. I hope that answered your question. We have time for just a couple more questions. What do we got? What do you guys have? Can you explain the concept of fair use and how it applies to copyrighted material?
I get so fired up when it comes to fair use, let me tell you, because it's a pet peeve of mine. I see it on YouTube a lot.
Okay.
When, especially, I don't know if are you familiar with like reaction content at all?
Right.
You'll have someone reacting to somebody else's video.
This feels like a reaction. The way that the setup is, it feels very reaction based.
And they're like, well, we can play. It's basically someone else watching someone else's video.
Right.
They're stealing the video and showing it on their platform.
Right. For money.
For money and monetizing it.
Right.
And they're like, well, it's fair use, because it's, it's what's the word when you change, when it means when you change it a little? Transformative. If it's got to be transformative, because they say it's transformative. But fair use means that you can use a little bit of copywritten material, just a little bit, and that's about it. It's like, oh, it's just, it's fair use. I was just showing. But the thing is, so if you played like a 2-second clip of a YouTube video in your sermon, or 2 seconds is too short. Let's say
7 seconds.
Let's say 7 seconds.
7 seconds
of a YouTube video. That would be probably considered fair use, because it's very short. It's not the entire video, and you did credit them.
Yep.
You did credit them in that use, so that is okay. It's kind of this weird gray area where it's like, oh yeah, don't use copyrighted material unless it's just a little bit of it. So it's kind of this thing where it's like, you're kind of towing a line when it comes to fair use, and people abuse it all the time. If you're using an entire YouTube video or an entire song, that's not fair use. You can't call that fair use.
Yeah.
It is something where, like I said, if you want to take a small piece of something, like citing sources, you used a paragraph of, something and you cited it, pretty much fair use. But copying an entire textbook is not fair use. So it's really just the amount, it's the context that you use it in. And again, make sure that you give them credit.
Yeah. It's very dicey. We didn't talk about it in the video because it's almost every case is different. You have to look at how it's used. You have to look at the scenario. You have to look at in what case is it being used, how much is being used. So is it a percentage? Is it, if you're looking at a 12-second video and that's the length of the video, let's think about like a Vine or a short TikTok, and you use 5 seconds of that 12-second video, that's 45%.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of the video. But if you're looking at 5 seconds of a 30-minute video, that's not a lot. So every piece of fair use is it needs to be taken in context to understand how fair use is. And I believe you can learn a little bit about fair use at AdventistRisk.org. There's some that you can find. They'll talk a little bit about how fair use is being used. and essentially kind of what all the different circumstances that you need to look at in that, because we are talking about pastors using things in their sermon. How much can they use? How much of something can I use? Is it a paragraph? Is it a sentence? Is it a word?
And I've seen cases where even if you are using a very small percentage of something, I have seen people still get copyright notices for it. Again, if you're using, it's more common when it's taken from like more secular media, like a clip. I saw one YouTuber get a copyright notice because he was looking at memes. That was the video. He's reacting to memes, and one of the memes had like, I think, a picture of Shrek on it, and the whole video, was flagged. It was like 2 seconds of a parody, type of, parody and transformative piece, and it still got a notice. So it's kind of one of those things where, like, again, sometimes you can do things right and still have these issues. So we're not going to preach, you fair use. Go ahead and try that, because sometimes it's better be safe than sorry.
Yeah. All right, I think we have time for one more question, maybe two. Let's see. What are some of the best practices for respecting copyright when using material from the internet or other sources?
I'm going to get a t-shirt that says always cite your sources.
Always cite your sources. From the internet, well, they might be asking, it's the internet. It's hard to find the source. It's hard to find where that originated from.
That's true.
I would say the best practice is, I want to say with images, if you find an image and you're not entirely sure if where you're looking is the original source, you can actually reverse search that image, and you can take that image and search it through Google Images, and it can see if it can find the original image. And you'll be able to find the original creator or whatever, and you can cite that. For other things, what would you say? What are best practices for citing? So just from the internet, it's so broad.
Honestly, just do your best.
Yeah.
Because some things can be very
Make an effort.
Yeah, some things can be very transformative, and that can be kind of a grapevine story. I've heard like sermon illustrations and stories that I sat there. I'm like, they made that. They did make that up. They got that from somebody else, but they didn't share where it came from. And sometimes just like things get copied and pasted and copied and pasted until it's just so we don't know who the original person who wrote it was. But if you are doing your best to find that original source, credit exactly where you found it. If the person you found it from, if they credited somebody, go back as far as you possibly can. And like I said, do your best to find that original source, cite it. And if you still run into issues, don't be afraid to say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then credit the original.
A lot of times poems will get credited as like unknown author.
Yeah.
They just say I looked, I couldn't find it. It was an unknown author. I don't know who the author was, and then that's when you'll get.
But if it's from an unknown author, you can say you found it on this Instagram account.
Yes, you can.
You found it in this book.
Yep.
So even if it says unknown author, you're still reading it from somewhere. What website did you read it off of? What was the date that it was published? So there are still ways that you can do your best, even with sources you're not too sure about.
Right. All right. I think we can do one more question. It's 6:45 in Central. Let's see. Rachel, what does this say?
How can churches navigate copyright issues when using social media platforms to share content like videos and images?
Okay. So the first thing I would say is YouTube has actually kind of leaned into this a little bit. When you post a video, one of the options is it says, will you allow this video for remixing? And what that means is that other channels on YouTube can use your content. It's very similar to TikTok. TikTok has the similar thing where you can react to or remix a video and post it as your own. A lot of what these channels are doing is they're linking the original creator. So when you remix or post this new video, when somebody watches your video, they can actually see Cameron is reacting to Rachel's video, and they can click on Rachel's name and it takes them to the original video.
Yeah.
So that's one way that a lot of these social media sites are actually trying to encourage people citing their sources, is by saying, hey, here, let me, you could react to content, you can use other content, but we're going to make sure that it's linked. That way people can always see the original creator, original whatnot. To put this into a scenario with a church, It's the kind of thing where you want to be able to, whatever you're using, whatever you're gathering online, make sure that you are using either your own stuff that you've created, or whatever you're creating, you're saying, hey, we got this idea from this, or you can even tag the original creator in the video, in the caption of the post or video or whatever, and say, photo by at photo by this person, and that gives the credit to the owner. Now there's a chance that, let's say I go to Instagram and I screenshot somebody's photo and then I post it, that person will say, hey man, that's my stuff, and then Instagram will take it down. But there's a lower chance of that happening if I say, look at this beautiful sunrise, the Lord is so wonderful, happy Sabbath, photo cred by
and link their account.
There's a much lower chance of that. Social media is an environment meant to create and share. The people always want credit. People always want to be credited for the stuff that they've made, the content that they've made. So being able to do that in this environment, being able to play the environment at their own games is the best thing you can do.
And I would also advise just to make sure that you're leaning into those resources that are safe. Like if you're creating if you're creating graphics for your church, use services like Canva. Get your photos off of Pexels or Unsplash, or YouTube has an audio library with music. If you are unsure about royalty-free music, you can find some on YouTube. I believe they have sound effects as well. So best practice is just to use what is safe and be prepared for any potential consequences otherwise. Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions this evening. Our next training coming up is focused on photography. So we're going to be trying to help you improve your photography. I'm not saying your photography is bad. I'm saying we're trying to take you up to the next level with our skills and abilities. I believe we have a slide for that somewhere. It's going to pop up. There we go. Picture Perfect. Intro to Photography for Churches. And that's going to be on August 22. Be sure to sign up for that. I believe that we have a sign up. So if you scan that QR code, you can register for our next training. And we want to know what ideas you guys have.
Yeah.
What do you want to learn?
So we've done several of these trainings now. Whether this is our seventh one now, sixth or seventh one.
Yep.
And so we definitely want to hear from you guys. What type of topics, what subject matter do you want to learn more about? Because we are a resource to you guys. We want to make sure that we're taking the time and you're taking the time to watch it, and we're giving you material that is going to be helpful to you in your church. So if there is something that you're really struggling with, something you really want to learn more about, let us know. In fact, say it in the comments now. If you've got any ideas, if you feel fired up about something that you really want to learn about, drop it in the comments, and we'll take that into account as we're planning our future trainings.
And if this is the first training that you're viewing, we have other trainings on our website. You can find them on the Kentucky Tennessee YouTube channel or the Georgia-Cumberland Conference YouTube channel. We have trainings going over graphic design. We have trainings that talk about public relations. We have trainings that talk about streaming, a little bit about technical arts and some of the streaming that goes on within church.
Lighting, a little bit in there.
Lighting, some basic knowledge to skim the surface a little bit. Our last one was about writing. We had one about writing.
Paola did that one. She did very well.
And then we also had one about social media that was also done by Paola. So check these out. These are available to you. These are resources for you to watch. And if you're joining us today live in this webinar, you are able to go back and watch this as much as you want. You'll get an email notification, and you can go back and watch this knowledge to see how many times I said and to see how many times I scratched my chin and how many times we told you to cite your sources. That's
the real one.
That's the bottom line here. So I really want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. Again, if you have an idea for an upcoming training, throw it in the comments or email us. We'd love to hear what your ideas, what you want to learn.
Yep. And again, we're not lawyers. If you have some kind of specific legal issue going on, reach out to, you can reach out to our office, but definitely reach out to Adventist Risk Management. They're going to be more helpful to you in the legal department. We're more preventative. rather than we're going to help you with a specific problem.
Right.
But yeah, if you have any questions about this material or any of our other trainings, both past and future, let us know.
All right. We'll see you guys at the next training, August 22.